Well, happy Marcast Friday here. Welcome back. Back in the studio here, revamped studio. Don't adjust your sets. Can talk through that, but did some adulting and got some things framed. And I cleaned out a lot of the other office here, kind of during the off season. But we're coming back here today. Yeah, new revamp, guys. Do you like the look here? A little different. Got rid of the clutter.
Yeah, it looks fantastic to me.
Evan's like, I don't care.
Let's get on with this.
It's clean. It's clean. I like it.
Well, it was one of those things that kind of rocked it for a couple years, and then Dorothy's like, you know that really looks messy, and like my friend Michael's like, that really looks messy, and I'm like, you just tell me, and the brother will clean it up. So we have our defend the deep here. I got framed. Kraken went through the entire losing streak, 8 game while I was waiting for that to come in. And then this is from, I have my media badges. And then when we did our Pitbull cruise many years ago, we met Pitbull and did shots with Pitbull and everything else. So they put together a little kind of smorgasbord of all of that. So I thought that was fun. A couple of programming notes. So we're here today. We're going to talk CFL schedule. We're going to talk negotiations list, all of that stuff. Amazingly, we have a CFL schedule to talk about whilst still waiting on an XFL 2024 schedule. So that's always fun. We had similar feelings last year for that, but we'll talk through all that today. I don't know how, in the interest of avoiding burnout, this might be a little bit more how the podcast is. Things happen. We'll do it. I don't know if Reed is a Friday every week kind of guy right now with everything. We took a couple weeks off, obviously, kind of after the CFL. And I don't know. I posted on the YouTube the other week, I just don't feel good right now, like posting. Well, like people are kind of waiting to find out about their jobs and lives and careers. So kind of waiting that out. But, it's 170, whatever weeks of this now. And if we want to get to 250, whatever, I think we need to go through this. So we'll kind of wade through all of that. And then if you are trying to get a hold of, like, I have a lot of people that message me on Facebook. I've been locked out of Facebook. Happened last year as well. My business pages get it's a whole thing. So if you like Fran, all these people that message me, Brad, all these people that message me on Facebook, LinkedIn, message me on LinkedIn, or my best made videos Instagram works, but my Markcast Instagram down, Markcast Facebook down, personal Facebook down. So it's kind of a whole pain in the butt that way. So Jason, I don't know if you deal with that stuff in Canada, but it really is kind of a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I think I'm actually locked out of my Facebook thing for Hussey's Huddle, so yeah, I'm dealing with the same thing.
I'm glad I tag you in that all the time. I do tag you one night, but yeah, like this one, I'm not able to post online. So Evan, I'm going to open my window here. Evan, how have you been since kind of the CFL bye that we've been going on?
Yeah, I've been good. I mean, still waiting on news here, I think, on the XFL and USFL side of things. But at this point, I'm not holding my breath. So, just been looking at some CFL stuff. There's been some transactions. The neg list came out. We can talk about that for a bit, along with some of the coaching changes. So, yeah, just been looking at that, taking care of business. And I guess life's been good.
That's good. Yeah. So we'll do that. I figured we'll kind of talk schedule today. We'll go week by week. That'll give us a good, excuse to kind of talk about, the Toronto Argonauts, coaching, higher, moving around in the Corey Maces of the world, and, BC Lions bringing everyone back, CFLPA here, chiming in. So that's always good to see. So let's, I guess, first off, talk about the schedule. Let me get it pulled up here. Thank goodness we have, people. And when I tweeted this yesterday, I meant this kind of tongue in cheek, but it seemed like the CFL listened. There was the big hubbub last year, and we didn't get a meaningful Grey Cup rematch until it was like way into the season, and the Argonauts had already kind of locked everything out. Jason, here we go. We have, Montreal, and who the heck was in the Grey Cup here? Montreal and Winnipeg here. What did you make of this year kicking off the season?
I think it's great that we have a Grey Cup rematch. I mean, it's only been a couple of years since we've previously done this. I think Hamilton and Winnipeg played a couple of years ago when they had played in 2019 in the Grey Cup. So they have done this before. But my one critique would be that I think the team that wins the Grey Cup should have the home game to host this. I think that this being in Winnipeg, I think it should really be in Montreal. But, I mean, I think I'm not really going to complain about having the Grey Cup rematch as the first game of the season.
Well, actually, I think that's a fair point. And I have my bookmarks here I got to pull up as well, because I know that Tim Capper with the Alouettes flight deck, like he was upset because they have a bunch of. I got some bookmarks saved of like people, because there's all these complaints and uncomplaints and everything about everything. But yeah, Montreal has a bunch of Thursday games, and they're more than they've ever had, and they've had historically more than everyone else. But it is a good point. Yeah, I feel like especially where the Grey Cup is a neutral site, I feel like we've won the Grey Cup. We should be able to host that. Evan, what do you make having the game back here, at least getting the rematch out of the way?
Yeah, I agree with Jason. I think it's good that, we finally are getting a rematch, and that was one of the things that people were talking a lot about, scheduling wise, was not having the Grey Cup rematch last year in week 1 between Toronto and Winnipeg. And then when that game did happen, it was pretty much meaningless because Toronto was sitting a lot of their guys, really just didn't have the same feel to it. But I agree with Jason. I feel like not having the game in Montreal is a significant, critique or something that would, not negate not negate the matchup, right? Because I feel like it'll still be a good game. There'll still be a lot of hype around that. But yeah, I think it was Darnell Sankey who put it up, and he said, typically I think if the team, wins the game, they're the one who gets to host, the game in the following season. But the CFL schedule, right, when it's 21-week season with only 9 teams, you're just going to have to, make do with some things. And I think in this case, that's one of them. I'm just glad that we're getting the rematch. I don't really care where it's being played. I know that maybe some Montreal fans might find that disrespectful, but I think this will be a good way to start the CFL season. Definitely.
Well, as someone that presumably here will go live for the kickoff, at least feels like a really hot game to me. It was like BC at Calgary last year or something. It was a really innocuous game. Like it didn't have, and I think they tried to say, well, this is whatever and historically, but I think this is cool. It sells itself. I mean, we have graphics built already. In terms of any other Grey Cup fallout, Jason, anything from this? I know Cody's been talking a lot, and he was on Rod Show. Anything else falling out with Winnipeg? And it seems like the band is ready to kind of stick back in there. Where this is going to be, we're still going to go through free agency and all that, but feels like this is going to be a complete team again next year.
Yeah, I think that, for the most part, the core of that team is still intact, but there are a few guys that I think Mike O'Shea, the head coach, said that are still considering retirement. So I'm looking at guys like Stanley Bryant and, Jamarcus Hardrick, guys that Evan brought up on the Grey Cup show. So still waiting on those guys. But I think in terms of, the quarterback, the receivers, those kind of guys will be back. And if those guys are intact, they're going to be a threatening team again.
So the other highlights they had here, and they had talked about this, I think, when Ambrosi had his either both the State of the Media and the Fan, or either or, but return to the balanced schedule. Jason, because we've kind of, and Evan and I have entered the CFL through all this kind of COVID world where this used to be this wasn't the differentiation. This was the norm, and then COVID, and we're cutting down costs and stuff. But going back to a balanced schedule, is that the thought process here? We're cutting back money for a few years. We're not flying people from BC to Montreal or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some people kind of complain that, the East Division teams would play more games against the West than they would against other Eastern teams. So I think people said that was the reason why the CFL did that. But I think at the end of the day, like you said, I think it's about cost and why they, cut out some of those, long distance cross country trips to save a little money the last couple of years when the CFL is a little lean in that regard. So good to see them go back to a balanced schedule. I think the biggest thing, what I'm looking at is, do we get a crossover team this year? Because the last time that we did have a balanced schedule back in 2019, we did have a crossover team, and that was the last time a team's crossed over into the East Division. So looking forward to seeing if that's the case this year.
Yeah, I always talk about that. It's like, I don't know, I feel like when you're watching NFL right now and they're like, Chicago Bears still alive. Like we always talk about it, but like, I would like to actually see, this, the crossover. I talk about consistency is key. I like the CFL summer schedule this Thursday through Sunday. It seemed like that worked a lot, the Sunday night games. And then obviously going back into the Friday, Saturday here in the fall. And we're, have not had any meaningful updates involved with the CFL Plus or the CBS Sports Network or anything for us American viewers. But Evan, in terms of that, obviously shifting things away from the NFL when we hit the fall, but the Thursday through Sunday, that all works.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was very equally distributed this summer, over those 4 days. And I would like to see it continue that way. And the CFL here, has clearly stated that. Yeah, I think that works out well, just, because there's not as much going on in the summer in terms of sports. You're probably going to get more U.S. viewers during that time period because I mean, it was the NFL, but really college football kind of started that shift, and I noticed that because the second that the college football season started, there weren't a lot of games, CFL games on CBS Sportsnet anymore just because they had to take those slots for college games, right? And then obviously, once the NFL, gets into full swing, a couple weeks later, whatever, that also takes away. So yeah, the schedule changes pretty quickly in the fall, but I like the summer one. I like having, those couple days. And I know not everybody likes having, 4 days of games or whatever, even 3 days, but I don't mind. I think if you, distribute it equally, it's just a longer week of football in general, and it feels like you get to take in more. I know, maybe if you're doing a recap or something and, you're doing it on Monday, it's harder to remember what happened, on Thursday or Friday. We've obviously dealt with that before, but, other than that, I think it's good. Yeah.
It keeps it, to me, it keeps the CFL, and they don't have as much a problem. I mean, this is something with the XFL and the USFL have of existing during the week outside of their games. I mean, obviously, with Naylor and Farhan and, all the, Kate and kind of everyone involved and, the TSN and Sportsnet and everything else. And by the way, the Sportsnet people, I would have loved to have been in those boardrooms with all the Shohei Ohtani talks. Like, we're taking down the CFL here. And then, the flight, that was wild. Like if we had been podcasting, what was that, 2 weeks ago, that would have been wild. But keeps the CFL more in the zeitgeist. I like it. I agree with Evan. Sometimes on Monday, you're like, what the heck happened on Thursday? But it was so weird to me that when they announced this shift back last year, we're going to have more Sunday games, all these like Saskatchewan people complaining, and I'm never going to go to games on Sunday because, we got to get up in the morning and drive. I mean, just Monday here, we were watching, what was it? The Titans and Giants and Green Bay and all that. And like, it's 11:30 here in New York. Like if you're watching these games, like so don't tell me about that. I mean, people make sacrifices that they need. Hussey, thoughts on the Sunday through or Thursday through Sunday stuff?
Yeah, I agree with Evan that it's good to have them like kind of spread out, so it keeps kind of the news cycle going throughout the week. I think that at the end of the day, I think it's something to be said about the CFL keeping a consistent schedule where the fans know when the games are going to be, the consistent 7:00 Eastern time slots to start the games every week. I think that's really important because you look at the NFL, like exactly when those games are on every week. So I think that's very important, and that'll help drive some viewership by itself.
Well, not even for that regard, like using my mother as an example, like may not even know what the game is, but knows like, hey, and we're West Coast. Hey, 10 a.m. I have a game, so let me log on. Let me pull up my Xfinity at 9 and figure out kind of what game I have. So, maybe I don't know it's the Red Blacks playing whatever, but at least I know there's going to be a game on at that time. And if we have time, we'll get into that. I thought some of the schedule reveals with the Lions and the Argos did, where the Titans had done it last year, where they're showing the logos and trying to figure all that out. And I saw Baker getting really chippy with the Winnipeg. There was like a Winnipeg, a BC Lions Twitter feud, but I thought that was funny. And then the last thing, and this is weird to me, and we had, last year we're doing moving the playoff games to Saturday. I still think the Grey Cup should be on Saturday, but we're doing that. And like after 1 year, it was a resounding success for moving forward with that. Evan, any comments on that? I mean, it seems like they're, at least for the time being, really diehard on doing the Saturday playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't mind. Again, it really has to do, I think, with the time of year. Your window kind of narrows when you're doing playoffs in, what is it, November? Just because, again, that's like deep into the NFL season. Yeah, I would like to have the Grey Cup, on a Saturday just because it's standalone. You're not playing other playoff games. But I didn't mind it on a Sunday. I went this year, obviously, with you guys. And, I mean, obviously there's NFL on, there's other stuff, next day's Monday, which is kind of tough if you want to go out and, do whatever, party after the game. But I really didn't mind it. I think those are all very nitpicky issues, maybe. And I'm always somebody who focuses more on the grand scale of things, in terms of where a league or where a team could improve. So overall, I'm really happy, with the way that this schedule's turned out, whether it's regular season, or the playoff structure.
Hussey, anything else on this?
Yeah, I don't mind the Grey Cups on Sunday personally because I think it's important for the host city to be able to have that full weekend for the whole festival aspect of it. You think of all the events that were going on Saturday night in Hamilton that you guys attended at the Hamilton Convention Center. So I think it's important for that aspect of things. And I think that because of the later start time of the Grey Cup, it doesn't interfere as much with the NFL side of things. It's more like a Super Bowl time kind of kickoff. So I think at the end of the day, I think Grey Cups on Sunday are here to stay.
Yeah, and I especially like that. I like getting all of our work done on Saturday and then being able to just enjoy Sundays. That to me works out. I had a couple of just wide-ranging tweets here, and then we'll get into the schedule. Tim Capper here, like I said, Alouettes Flight Deck. Alouettes opening the season, Grey Cup rematch at Blue Bombers, first time opening season in Winnipeg since 16. It's talking about the 3 Thursday games, the Sunday, Monday at 1, Saturday 4 with preseason. The other one I thought was interesting here I had with Derek Taylor. It appears the Red Blacks, because I love Derek for all this like nerdy stat stuff, which is great. It appears the Red Blacks have the most restful schedule in total. They'll have 14 days more rest than their opponents. 9 times they'll have had more rest versus 6 with less. The Elks will only have 4 times rest versus time. I don't know how you figure all this stuff out, but Jason, is that exciting? I mean, Red Blacks here, let's give them any opportunity we can here. Let's give them more. I even tweeted, because Tim Baines tweeted out like, oh, good to see the Red Blacks have a week 1 bye. I said, got to get time to round. Got to need all that time they can get.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, I don't know how Derek Taylor calculated this, but I was gonna say the same thing about the Red Blacks. Make a joke about they need all the help that they can get in this scenario.
Yeah, look at this. BC working on the hardest there, and Edmonton. Let's see. I hope Edmonton maintains all that. So let's get in here. So like we said, we talked about week 1 here. Montreal at Winnipeg. Hamilton going into Calgary, has Saskatchewan at Edmonton. BC at Toronto, and I think this would be a good opportunity to talk BC and Toronto coaching, all that kind of stuff. But what do you make of this, Hussey? Your Ticats traveling into Calgary?
Well, I mean, I'm very curious to see the outcome for Bo Levi Mitchell this offseason because, I mean, a lot of people complained last year that they didn't get to go to Calgary and they didn't get the return game. Who knows if he would have been even healthy for that game, but that's just another point altogether. But I think at the end of the day, Calgary and Hamilton playing in the first game of the season, I think that's a pretty good matchup. I think Hamilton will be interesting with the new head coach there, and I think Calgary bringing back probably a lot of the same group as last year in terms of the quarterback and the head coach and whatnot. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think a lot of the time the CFL likes to get those Western teams to have their home games earlier in the season so they don't have to deal with the weather as much later on in the season. So I think that's big. And you see, 3 of 4 West teams hosting week 1 here.
Yeah, Evan, what did you make? Talking to Hamilton and the coaching and all of that, that it was really weird. It was like last week and they had a press release like Steinhauer has a different role now. And like, by the way, we're going to have a head coach later. Like, it was kind of weird how they did that. What did you make of everything that Hamilton did?
Well, I actually think it was a good thing. And a lot of people, I understand, the structure was strange. I think they could have just made the announcement at once, whatever. But it's really nice to see that they were able to retain both Scott Milanovich and Orlando Steinhauer, just because I feel like, Orlando Steinhauer, he's a very good football mind. But maybe that team, ran its course with him at the helm. After you go to back-to-back Grey Cups and you're not able to win those games, especially, one that went to overtime and was ultimately a heartbreaker. I mean, both of them were, but, especially the second one there in Hamilton, that was very difficult. So, I think having him, still in the building and still having, some control over certain decisions, I think that's a good thing. I don't think you needed to just get rid of him completely, but at the same time, having him be the head coach, it was pretty clear that maybe that wasn't going to be the best thing moving forward. And, I'm really glad to see that Scott Milanovich, got the job there in Hamilton. It was kind of unclear where he was going to go. There was some rumblings of him going to Saskatchewan, but that ultimately didn't happen. You know, those rumors were cleared away pretty quickly. I know we were talking about that at Grey Cup, but really the two finalists for the Saskatchewan job were Buck Pierce from Winnipeg and then Corey Mace from Toronto, obviously. But yeah, I think Milanovic, you know, I think he'll do great things there, you know, regardless of who the quarterback is. I know that this game that we're talking about here between Hamilton and Calgary is supposed to be, you know, Bo Levi's return to the Stampeders. Whether or not that actually happens, or even if he's there, is he the starting quarterback in that game? A lot of questions around that. But regardless, you know, whoever's the quarterback there, you know, could be Taylor Powell, could be somebody else. You know, I think Scott Milanovic will do good things. Again, I keep saying it, and well, I was saying it during the season, but I'll keep saying it now, even as we move into the 2024 run. You know, what he did with that offense, you know, I think that's why he got the head coaching job. Really, just that immediate turnaround. I think that really sparked something, and that team went from, you know, maybe a situation where you go into a complete rebuild to, hey, we can just do some restructuring here, get Milanovic in as the coach, you know, move Orlando to the front office with Ed Hervey, who I believe is the new general manager there. And I think ultimately, again, just being able to retain those two guys and not having one leave and not having, you know, some form of power structure. Again, I get it might be a bit interesting. You don't see that very often, where a coach is removed from, you know, his duty but is still with the team. You don't see that very often, but I think in this case, it's a really good thing for the Ticats.
Yeah, it's like you said, and Jason, seems like we had every complaint last year, and they're like, we're gonna figure out everything that everyone complained about week 1. We're gonna fix here. We're gonna get Bo Levi into Calgary. We're gonna do the Grey Cup rematch. You know, we're gonna do BC Toronto. I just looking at this, like, this is like, okay, guys, yeah, even this BC Toronto game closing out Sunday, like, let's say you got it's a CFL season's a marathon here. Talking Saskatchewan, Edmonton, a good point to talk about Corey Mace, and that happened right after we kind of logged out everything for the season. We joked a lot online, like the ass kissing that went in, and I'm sure Corey Mace is a tremendous gentleman and a phenomenal football coach. But my Twitter for about 3 days was like, Corey Mace is great, and he saved 18 children in the war, and he did, and you're like, guys, like I understand that this anyway, but Corey Mace couldn't be worse here in Saskatchewan. Jason, what do you make of this? Them going on the road to go to Edmonton here, but we get the new look Rough Riders here, and he's still saying they want Trevor Harris, I guess, right?
Yeah, it seems like they're very committed to Trevor Harris going into next year. I mean, that's one thing that Corey Mace really was adamant about in his opening press conference with the Riders. And I think it was a good hire. I think that in general, I prefer an offensive head coach if I was running a football team. But I think there still is value in having these up-and-coming defensive minds, especially in the CFL where, a defensive-led team can make a big difference. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it works out. And about all the hoopla that was going on around, Corey Mace and all the, the cheerleading. I think that, that just goes to show you, like, there aren't that many new faces that get into head coaching jobs in the CFL. So I think whenever that happens, you see a lot of buzz made about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Like, and I'm excited. I mean, it's something to take away, but it was you. I mean, you would have thought that they, like now if they had flown June Jones up here out of and gotten him involved in all that, I think Evan and I probably would have been leading the cheerleading bandwagon. So, Evan, any thoughts here on Corey Mace? Because we missed talking about all that.
Yeah, well, I think the one really cool part about Corey Mace is, he's the definition of a player's coach. You could tell people immediately gravitated towards him, when he was hired. And, I'm not gonna carry on whatever you're talking about in terms of the Twitter parade for Corey Mace. I'll be a bit more reserved with my thoughts, but there is no denying he's a good coach. And I think the best part, like I said, he's a player's coach, really cares about those guys, and he's young, right? He's only 37. Believe it or not, him and Trevor Harris are the same age, and Trevor Harris is probably going to be his starting quarterback next season, which is fascinating to me. You don't see that very often, but again, he's a young coach who brings a fresh philosophy to the team, one that I think they really need. I don't want to say that things got stale over there in Regina, but I feel like he's a guy that can come in and really just almost rebrand the team in a way. You look at what Antonio Pierce is doing with the Raiders. I think it'll be something like that where you really see a significant culture change. So yeah, really happy for Mace. I think that's a good hire. I was honestly surprised that they didn't go in the direction of an offensive guy like Buck Pierce. but I think, the money was right in Winnipeg for him to stay. And again, Corey just, I think, brings a bit more, I keep using the term culture, but I think he brings more of that in. And then in terms of, who's going to run the offense, well, they just brought in Mark Mueller from Calgary, to lead the offense there in Saskatchewan. And I think that was a pretty good hire. Obviously, Calgary's offense struggled a bit last year, very up and down, only a few games where they really seemed complete. But, I think that there's some potential there. I think Mark Mueller, again, he worked with Jake Mayer. He's worked with a lot of these guys, who have been successful. Mark and Michelle. I mean, again, list of names, Reggie Bagleton. So even if that offense wasn't complete, the players, again, that he had to work with there in Calgary were some of the better in the league, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think, like you were saying, in terms of just that players coach, more the leader of men at that point, of like there had been, and it was so weird. Like once Dickinson went out, and it was like the players didn't respect him, and he had totally lost the room. And you're like, okay, like I mean, clearly there was a lot of like ill-seated kind of things going on there. So I mean, a fresh start there. This would be exciting. Yeah, crazy to think that Trevor Harris is my age and is still playing football in the Canadian Football League. Is truly remarkable. Jason, anything else on Saskatchewan?
Well, I think it's going to be very interesting to see, with this Mark Mueller hiring, the effects that it has on not only Saskatchewan, but Calgary next year. Does Calgary's offense all of a sudden get better? Because I've heard people, around the CFL, tweet out saying that they were kind of blaming Mark Mueller a little bit for Calgary's struggles last year. So maybe it could be like an addition by subtraction. Not saying he's a bad coach or anything, but maybe, Calgary's offense does take another step next year. And, maybe Saskatchewan's, offense, struggles a little bit. So I'm very interested to see how it works out.
Well, I mean, especially, with Mayer or whatever, like this might be, this is like contract year here, right? Like we got to kind of figure out what we're doing. Not like last year, we were easy. We went into Calgary, kind of kicked the snot out of them. BC here in Toronto, people, on all the complaints about, Toronto home games and everything, you get one opening weekend here. BC going in, I had the article here, retaining their whole staff, which I think is, obviously tremendously exciting. But Jason, are you surprised that, we had talked about the Ryan Phillips and the Scotts and everything of the world, like that they're not, that BC was able to retain everyone? Is that, are we paying up? Is that a lack of, I can't imagine it would be a lack of interest in any of the BC staff.
Well, I think it came down to the fact that there weren't that many openings around the league this year. You had Saskatchewan, which is obviously, a full search and everything like that. They interviewed a bunch of candidates, but Hamilton really wasn't an open, head coaching job. We didn't really know that job was open. So until they officially announced Milanovic as the head coach there. So I think it comes down to the fact that there weren't that many open jobs this particular offseason, and they'll have to wait another year in terms of, Ryan Phillips and Jordan Maksimic becoming potential head coaches in the CFL.
Yeah, and I met Jordan, not Scott. Like, too many coaches and roster stuff. Yeah, Evan. This is exciting. BC, full on Grey Cup hosting here. I think this is kind of the window, and with Vernon and everything else. Are you thrilled as I am to have them kind of keep all their staff together?
Absolutely. Both the coordinators, Ryan Phillips and Jordan Maksimic, both of those guys, I think, were head coaching candidates in a variety of places. But again, you just don't know the direction in which franchises want to move in and what openings are going to be available, like Jason pointed out. So all those guys, I think, would have been finalists for, any openings, like they would have been interviewed, things of that nature. But that didn't happen, and BC gets to keep them. And I think that's really significant because I think those two guys did a fantastic job in 2023. And it's very rare to have, two coordinators on your staff who, again, would both be head coaching candidates. That could create some significant losses if they were to take other jobs. But again, they didn't. Those opportunities were not available. And therefore, BC has taken that to their advantage, keeping both of those guys. I think that makes them, an incredibly strong team next year. What else do you say, right? It's just that the work there has already spoken for itself. So I'm excited to see, what they can do next year. And really, if we want to talk about BC here for a minute briefly, I don't want to say, I really don't want to say next year's make or break. I could have said that this year, right? I mean, being in the West Final with Winnipeg again, which we literally predicted probably 6 months before it actually happened, just seemed like all signs were pointing in that direction. Very well could happen again next year, to be honest. We'll see, who Winnipeg retains and, who goes. There's still some uncertainty there. But, next year with BC hosting the Grey Cup in Vancouver, which I think is going to be fantastic by itself, regardless of who's playing in that game. But, the fact that BC's hosting next year and, the fact, again, that they were able to retain both of their coordinators, which something tells me that one of those guys is probably going to leave after next year for a job. I'd have to imagine, or again, at least be interviewed. You're going to go through that cycle of uncertainty. Next year, I mean, you really have a chance to make a statement. Things are, lined up in the right direction. Vernon, clearly is your franchise guy. Again, very good pickup there. I can't underestimate, how good it was that they brought him over from Montreal, that season in 22 when Rourke got hurt. They brought him in as insurance, and that's paid off, I think, more than anybody could have ever imagined. But we'll see. I really hope that they can pull it off next year. I think we'd all, love to see BC at home. I know I'd love to see that. That would make the experience just a little bit more special for me. But yeah, man, I mean, who knows? Just really, I hope BC is reading the room in that regard. I think I'll leave it at that.
Well, and I think that Rick had said already, and there was the other quote coming out that, they're already working to retain a lot of the players and everything. I don't know. I think it was a really stacked deck and to the point where you had that incredible depth. Like, I don't know if Lucky Whitehead isn't back this year, if I'm going to have like a heartbreak at this point, just because of kind of the use of a lot of these players during the year. And obviously you had that depth where people got hurt and you could cycle through. But to me, I don't know. It almost feels like there's a couple names that maybe are more expendable than it felt like they were going into last season. Jason, thoughts on BC and then kind of any of the coaching or the player stuff?
Yeah, I think Lucky Whitehead will be one guy that I don't see being back just because of how much he was getting paid previously. I think they're probably going to want to spend that money elsewhere to retain other guys. I think Hollins and Hatcher are both free agents as well. So I think they'll want to retain those guys above Whitehead. So I think it's going to be really important for them to do that. But I will say this. I think I'm more confident. We'll see what happens in the offseason. I think I'm more confident in BC going into next year than I was going into this year, because I think at the beginning of this year, I didn't think that Vernon Adams I think it was a question that Vernon Adams was a starting caliber franchise level quarterback in this league. And I don't have that question anymore. So I think that's really important. And obviously the fact that they've been able to retain a lot of their coaching staff, the entire coaching staff, and they're probably going to retain a lot of their players. I think I'm pretty confident in BC going into next year.
And then in terms of Toronto, Evan, Corey Mason, all of that, and then they're still working to replace him in Toronto. Kind of any thoughts on that? And I know Mike Mitchell's done the deep dives, but we'll get into some negotiation lists here if anyone has any comments on any of those players. But Evan, any thoughts on Toronto here coming back after obviously losing? And it was the CFL super late news Twitter account tweeted the other day Chad Kelly got picked off again by the Montreal Alouettes, but I thought was incredibly funny. But thoughts here on Toronto hosting BC and anything with their staff?
Yeah, I mean, Toronto, I really don't have any doubts about either. I mean, that team was so complete this year. Again, we'll see. I'm sure Mike would know. I don't know how many free agents they have to re-sign, and I don't have a number on that. We'll see who they're able to retain, maybe bring in a couple new guys, but you wouldn't, I mean, even if you lose some guys, I really don't think you need to bring in a whole lot there to make up for anything. I think what happened against Montreal and that game, the playoff game, I think that was just a whiff simply. I think again, just one of those games you weren't ready. It sucked, again, really sucked to see that because, again, that's not a game that really should define anybody's career, especially Chad Kelly's. I think Kelly will come back next year and he'll play just as he played this season. Again, he has shown, just like guys like Vernon Adams have and Zach Caleros and even Cody Fajardo now, who just got extended. These guys are franchise quarterbacks. They found a home. They can be successful. And, I see Toronto being right back in the Grey Cup race without a doubt.
Yeah, I think in terms of Cody as well, and we've talked about this. I think Naylor commented about it as well during the season. Like, it should be a lesson. Quarterbacks in the CFL are a commodity, and like it might be worth. Same with like Jake Mayer here. Like it might be worth. Okay, let's work through a couple seasons of this versus and the next thing you know, you send off. Yeah, talking about the Alouettes in Montreal, like sports are weird. The Kraken just went into Chicago 2 weeks ago and absolutely got rocked. Kind of by a team that they should have beaten, and it spiraled this whole kind of losing streak and all that stuff. And then they just beat the same team 7-1 last night in Seattle. Like, sports are kind of weird that way. Anything else here? Like I said, stacked, and we won't do as deep dive here with all the other weeks, but really stacked week one here. Jason, anything else on that?
Well, I'll just build on a point about Toronto. I think that one thing to watch this offseason is that Chad Kelly goes from making basically nothing to making $650,000 a year. So there probably will be some losses to this roster this offseason. It just depends where those losses tend to fall.
The 600, and that was talking about the Shohei contract and the 700 million, and like that would be like $1 billion Canadian. Could you imagine the Blue Jays paying $1 billion on that? So coming in here, my only big takeaway with this, I kind of glance in ahead, and if anyone has any kind of standout thoughts for all this, we'll kind of scroll through all that. But Ottawa gets their first, the first game. It's the first home game. We're hosting on a Thursday against Winnipeg. To me, that is kind of a bummer. Snooze at that point here. We already have the week one bye, and then we're coming in, and that's probably getting there. I can't imagine Ottawa opening up against Winnipeg. Jason, thoughts on that?
Well, it's worth pointing out that Ottawa beat Winnipeg last year in that one of the games of the year. So, I mean, I think that's kind of the angle that they're trying to play here. But yeah, it sucks for anybody that gets that first week bye. I really feel bad for any fan base that has to go through that. Like, you're excited for the season to start. Oh, my team doesn't play this week.
Yeah, and like even with the NFL, like it's so weird how like the Commanders didn't have their bye till last week. So it was like I didn't even know. Like you're kind of living through, and then you're like, wait, what is happening here? What's going on? Montreal going in, Saskatchewan, Hamilton. Who's getting the Toronto's got the week 2 bye here to kind of figure out stuff with that. Evan, did you have, and I have the negotiation list here pulled up. Did you have any names? I know you tweeted out some of the names. Anyone you wanted to talk about in particular on the winter neg list that came out?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we just go, team by team, I didn't write anybody down in particular, but there's certainly a couple guys I can talk about. I mean, starting with the BC Lions here first, I got the list pulled up. Like Devron Harper, he's someone, who's very close to me. I interviewed him, and I forget the other guy's name. Ty James. I've also talked to him at Mercer. They've been a very good duo in the FCS, and I think he's a guy, who does have maybe a realistic chance of playing in the CFL. Because keep in mind on the neg list, some of these guys, that are listed probably aren't going to play in the CFL. Every now and then you'll get one of these really cool stories. Like the one last year that got brought up constantly was Tommy Lee Lewis, who was on the neg list in Calgary for like 7 years. They pretty much waited for his entire NFL career, to be over, which spanned multiple teams. For him to finally come up, and he did play, he did make an impact. It wasn't anything ridiculous because he's an older guy now. Again, they waited 7 years for him or something, but he was there. He did sign on, and, did play a portion of the season. So yeah, Devron Harper there from Mercer, Sean Chambers at Montana State. I mean, again, one of the top FCS programs. They always have a lot of guys. Going down to Edmonton, Holt Nailers. I don't know if he's a free agent right now, but I believe he was with the Seahawks out of East Carolina. Isaiah Davis, again, another really good running back from South Dakota State, another top FCS program. I would expect him to have some NFL interest. KJ Jefferson's an interesting one. Not really sure where he stands. I've seen him play before at LSU, live. So I've seen his ability. Again, kind of an interesting prospect. Again, a guy that I'd really have to dive deeper on. Cam Rising, a bigger name from Utah, didn't play this year, I don't think, due to injury. But we'll see where he's at. He's going back to school for like a 7th year. You get all these guys in college now with COVID eligibility going back for year 7. Let's see. BJ Wilson was just picked up by the Roughnecks in the XFL. You'll see there's a couple guys here who do have XFL interest, who signed letters of intent, were acquired in the rookie drafts over the summer. Dresser Wynn, quarterback from Tennessee Martin, he was actually already with the Elks this season, signed on for a couple weeks to their practice roster, got an extra few game checks. He's with the Rams now, I believe, on their practice squad, or he might have been released, but he was with the Rams. He went back, was like with them in training camp, got cut, signed with Edmonton, couple, checks sitting there, and then went back to the Rams for a bit. And, we'll see where he's at, going into 2024. Also, in regards to Edmonton, shout out to Rick Saratella, who's been on here before, just took one of the scouting jobs there with the Elks. So,
wow, that's exciting.
It's the other day. What's that?
I said that's exciting. That's awesome for Rick.
Yeah. No, it's good. Anyway, just going down the list here, going to Calgary. Jerome Cap, that's the name that rings the bell from Kutztown Division II school. I believe he was with the Jets at one point. Josh Love, former USFL player with the Michigan Panthers there, and Pittsburgh Maulers, I believe. Quarterback from San Jose State. Auden Tate from Florida State. I believe he was with the Bengals. That was also a name that I was surprised to see on there. Well, maybe not surprised, but one of those names where you're like, oh, it'd be cool to see him in this league. I think Mike had brought him up at one point in regards to the XFL. Just going down here to Saskatchewan, Jerry and Ely, I believe, just signed from Ole Miss. Chase Garbers from California, I believe he could have a CFL future. Again, another quarterback. These lists are always pretty quarterback heavy. Thacarius Keys, that one rings a name from Tulane. I've been down there before to do work. Winnipeg Blue Bombers, let's see. Michael Ayers, I believe, from Ashland. He signed, or I don't know if he signed a letter of intent, but he was drafted by the Roughnecks in the XFL and had some previous CFL experience before. I don't think it was with Winnipeg. It was maybe with Ottawa, but don't quote me on that. Mark Gronowski, another guy from South Dakota State. You always see these, these top FCS schools on there, the Montanas, the Dakotas, and again, those guys, I mean, geographically, those are all pretty close to Canada already. So it'd be fun to see some of those guys up there. Anthony Witherstone from Merrimack, I believe, just signed with maybe the Battlehawks in the XFL as of yesterday, signed a letter of intent with one of the XFL teams, and I believe was in an NFL training camp. Going down to Hamilton, Shamar Bridges, a name that rings a bell, was with the Ravens at one point out of Division II, Fort Valley State. Thomas Castellanos from Boston College. Again, another quarterback, but a guy, who might not have that NFL interest. He played at Boston College this year, was the starter for them. DeQuan Finn from Toledo is a guy that's interesting. He'll go back to college. He's in the transfer portal right now, I believe. I don't know where he's supposed to go, but again, a guy that I'm looking at there. So again, he won't even have a pro future, I don't think, till 2025. But a name to keep an eye on. He's been one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch this year in college and to kind of follow along. Austin Reed from Western Kentucky, probably a guy that'll have NFL interest, I'd think, but he plays in that one of those wide open air raid type offenses. Again, really liked his stuff. He played at a Division II school before he came to Western Kentucky. I believe it was West Florida. So quick rise for him, and again, a name that I'm familiar with. Talia Tagovailoa, brother of Tua Tagovailoa, who played at Maryland, started for them. We'll see. Again, these are just names. Nothing really here that's concrete. Rajon Wright, I believe, he has a brother who I think is with the Cowboys. I always get him mixed up, but he might have been the guy that was on Last Chance U. I'm not sure, but anyway, going down to Toronto, Mike Mitchell did a deep dive on these guys, so check out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you want on news, Mike did.
Right. He was very fascinated by this list. I mean, I won't talk about too many guys here just for time's sake, but John Matocha, the quarterback from Colorado School of Mines, just passed Tyson Bagent for the all-time passing. I'm not sure if it's all-time passing touchdowns or just all-time career touchdowns in general at the NCAA level. Colorado School of Mines is a Division II school, and he passed Tyson Bagent, who's currently with the Bears and played at played at Shepherd, and Matocha will be in the Division II National Championship coming up against Harding. So, we'll see what happens with him. John Reese Plumley, that's a guy that I've seen before live at UCF. I've actually seen him and Castellanos. Castellanos was at UCF before he transferred to Boston College. So good to see both of those guys here on CFL Neg lists, that they're generating some interest. Matt Sluka from Holy Cross is a fascinating one. Very mobile guy. I want to say he has some sort of background in lacrosse, but I could be wrong. But I've watched him plenty. Again, another FCS quarterback, but a guy that can run and throw really well. So interested to see if he latches on. Could definitely see him coming out and signing a CFL contract. Maybe pretty quickly. Again, some of these guys will have NFL interest, go to a camp. Some of them won't. You'll see some of these guys sign on pretty quickly, just depending on they gauge their level of interest. Going down to Ottawa, Tim Demarat from Fordham. I believe he was in camp with the Commanders. Very good FCS quarterback last year in 22. Khalil Pimpleton, he was on Hard Knocks with the Lions, if I remember correctly. It's just kind of a fun one. He played at Central Michigan. I don't actually know a ton about him in terms of the player. And then you go down to Montreal. There's some names here that I think are returning. Davis Cheek was a USFL guy, I believe, with the New Orleans Breakers, the quarterback. Brett Gabbert played at Miami. I think he's coming back. Miami of Ohio, not the school in Florida. Jeray Jenkins is the guy I'm really hoping to see up there. Sign an undrafted contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars, I believe. Played at LSU back in 22, so I saw him. Very familiar with him. He's a great player. Surprised that he didn't latch onto a practice squad or anything like that. Parker McKinney from Eastern Kentucky, another FCS quarterback. It's incredible how many of them there are on this list. Probably a guy that gets an NFL look. And then EJ Perry from Brown, that's a USFL guy, also played with the Michigan Panthers. Lindsey Scoot, it's Lindsey Scott, it's a typo there, but played at Incarnate Ward. Obviously, planning on joining the Houston Roughnecks this season if they're around. Believed he signed the letter of intent with them, so he's good to go. And Darwin Thompson, I think, is the last guy really worth talking about. Believe he was in the NFL for a bit, maybe has some playing experience, so kind of a veteran in that regard. But yeah, there's your neg list, guys. So that shaved off a couple minutes of the stream.
No, that's good, Jason. No, and I wanted, at least it's good, and it's a little deep divey God knows how Evan keeps track of kind of all this stuff, but because it was I posted the other day, and these people are they're in talks. It's like, no, they're on the list, and they go up to Canada. Are you a proponent of the neg list here? What do you make of this, Mr. North of the Border?
I never get excited about the negotiation list personally, because one, they only reveal like 1/4 of it. So I think it's like 40 players long per team. So they only reveal or have to reveal 10 names, which I guess is better than nothing. But I think that the CFL does a very poor job, and I've said this before, of introducing the American players to the fans. I think that I would like to see some kind of draft like for American players, even if it's just some small thing with just like an online live stream or something like that, just to tell us something about these players that are coming into the league, because they just show up in training camp and it's just like you just have to figure everything out on your own. So I think at the end of the day, not a huge fan of the negotiation list process in the CFL.
Well, I think it could be better. It's one of those things like it takes work, right? And we did that with the because the USFL did the college draft and the XFL did the rookie draft, and we did that, and we're same thing. Like they just dump a list, and we're okay. These teams acquired these people, and we're sitting there, and I need Evan and like 4 or 5 other guys on to be able to okay, who knows about this guy or who can talk about it? Like I know we had Coach Craig on, and I know Rick's been on some of those that Evan was talking about with the Elks, but like you need a lot of people, because some of these guys, you're not. You're getting the TSN panel together to talk about some of these guys. They're not going to know even half of what Evan is able to spout off, even just here on the stream. So it's one of those things challenging. At least to me, I like seeing players that are interested in the XFL and the CFL is interested in them. I like seeing these guys, pop up a couple of different places, just because it means that God knows what's going to happen with this UFL or whatever, but there are options out there. But yeah, the whole secretive and okay, we can have this many quarterbacks, or it's kind of weird in that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Naylor brought up a great point to the thing about quarterbacks is like, I wish teams had to narrow down like who's their guy. Like they should have like only a maximum amount of quarterbacks allowed on these lists that they have exclusive rights to.
Yeah. So let's get in here. We'll kind of scroll through all this. We got about 10 minutes or so left on here. Hits keep coming here, right? Okay, Calgary at BC back in at Winnipeg here. Exciting to me. Let's see here. Ottawa going on the road against Montreal. Anything stand out to you here with this one, Evan?
Which game did you say? Sorry.
Oh, just week 3, and I mean, to me, the BC Winnipeg is stand out, and BC's challenging schedule here, going in Toronto, hosting Calgary, and then going back into Winnipeg here.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the BC Winnipeg game stands out there more than anything. I will say, BC, going up against Toronto and Winnipeg, all these heavyweights, in the East and West, it's again, they're going to be tested early. We just talked about, it's a big prove-it year for BC. Can they really get it done? Well, they're going to have to open up against some pretty tough competitions. So we might find out, pretty early on whether or not, maybe not whether or not, but what the identity of this team is, I think is what I'm trying to say. It's kind of instead of playing the bottom tier of teams first, you kind of go out there and you take on, all these teams that you had or that you played very well against, to some degree in the previous season, or you had some very good games against, right? Like BC and Winnipeg, there were some, I guess you'd say, classic matchups there, some blowouts in both directions, some close games. And then obviously the Toronto game, between that and BC, like I thought BC and Toronto, I thought that was going to be the Grey Cup this year. And I was obviously mistaken. But both of those teams, made it to the final and then lost. So we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't mind that. As the Grey Cup next year either in BC, right? I think that'd be a great matchup. Not that we need to talk about that quite yet because 2024 season's still quite a ways away. But yeah, no, I think it'll be an interesting start for BC here.
Well, and Jason, to me, and obviously we got to go through a lot of free agency here, but identities have changed here, right? We're maybe like Montreal last year. We're walking in, and maybe we didn't do as because I can't remember how the schedule came out last year in terms of whatever else we were doing, but we certainly didn't do this. And you're sitting here and Montreal we're looking at as one of the worst teams in the league potentially last year. We're here, you're like, Ottawa's got to go into Montreal. That's really any identities of these teams changed from last year to this year. I mean, Hamilton, I still don't really know how to read. Saskatchewan's got a lot of missing kind of question marks here, but Montreal feels good. Edmonton, if they can roll, feels good, and then we know what Winnipeg and BC and Toronto are.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was going to bring up is that Hamilton and Saskatchewan, week 2 and 3, they actually play back-to-back here. So that's very early in the season, both brand new head coaches. So we always talk about, it takes time for a new coach to establish their culture, their systems, and it'll be interesting to see, who gets the edge in those if it goes 2-0 either way in that early home and home there between Hamilton and Saskatchewan. But yeah, like you said, I think Montreal looks a lot better than they did at this time a year ago. And, that game for Ottawa, I think it'll be interesting to see how they look this year, because I think Ottawa and Edmonton, these are going to be very crucial years for both of these teams. I think that it's been far too long without playoffs. It's not good for any team in the CFL to go more than 3 years without playoffs. So I think it's going to be very important for Ottawa and Edmonton to have, big seasons next year.
Yeah, I've said already on here, I don't know how Ottawa has a fan base right now. I mean, I understand that they won a Grey Cup back before we got involved in all this stuff, but I really just kind of living through all of this here. Hamilton right here going into Ottawa. If you're looking at this, right, does Ottawa get their first win week 4? Right, hosting Hamilton. I mean, you're just, you're asking a lot here. Edmonton going into BC, that'll be good. So not only are we doubling down, well, no, it's not, because I keep in my mind, I keep thinking that Toronto is in the Grey Cup, but we have here the East Finals here, Montreal at Toronto. Should be exciting their week 4. Evan, you certainly have to have that one circled.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Montreal, they're already starting to bring back a lot of their guys. You can tell that, they're not wasting any time. And, Philpott, Fajardo got extended, Sankey, Lemon, all those guys are already, any questions that people had about the core, I think those have already been answered. So, now it's just a matter of, can they elevate their game in 2024? Because again, the whole storyline with Montreal was they had a pretty pedestrian, I guess you'd say, regular season. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but again, no one saw them as a Grey Cup contender. And suddenly playoffs rolled around, and those last 3 games were nothing short of incredible. So hopefully they can carry some of that momentum into the regular season and make that play more exciting. And we'll see whether or not they're able to get off to that hot start, or maybe they open things up and it's a bit slow and it still takes time to get acclimated again. But again, when you're bringing back a lot of the same guys, that's a good sign in terms of continued success. So it'd be cool to see them go into Toronto, and maybe have more of a back and forth type of game this time, as opposed to Montreal just kind of running away with it early. And Chad Kelly, just struggling, not seeing the field correctly. Hopefully all that'll be resolved for that game, because again, that'd be a very fun one, a repeat of the East final that I guess nobody expected.
Yeah. Not to date this podcast too much, it looks like Brandon Staley was officially let go from the LA Chargers here. So unless there was any surprise, we'll kind of go through here. We got to get out of here pretty soon. But, Toronto and Saskatchewan, some of these, we get into the, I say here by July, we're getting a little bit into the minutia of that. You never know. BC, Hamilton. I mean, we had that where Hamilton came in last year, right? It kind of rocked BC's world. I'm going to kind of scroll through. Jason, do you have anything you want to pop up on this? Let me know here.
Yeah, I mean, like BC Hamilton, the second game last year that took place in Hamilton, that was one of the games of the year. I was there in attendance. I would say, as a Ticats season ticket holder, that was my favorite game that I attended last year, even though the Ticats even lost. So, I mean, really excited for that one for sure.
Definitely down here. So we got Toronto back at Montreal, so a week apart, but then they'll be going in here. I don't know. It's just, to me, some of these, I know it was predictable last year, but it felt like it was a good season here to get some juice behind some of these teams. I mean, this Ottawa, Edmonton, week 6 is a little bit, Thursday night here, Toronto at Montreal. I mean, that's like, if there's nothing going on XFL in the world, like that's a Thursday night live show we have going into that game. I mean, I'm just, saying here, like some of these games to me seem a little bit more appealing on paper now than they did maybe a year ago. Evan, any thoughts here? I'm just going to kind of keep getting through here.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to the NAG list for a quick second. I mean, I know we've kind of moved off that, but there was actually a player I forgot to talk about, James Morgan from Florida International, former NFL draft pick, who also played in the USFL with the Pittsburgh Maulers. So you're seeing this common theme. Again, a lot of guys that have XFL interest, a lot of guys that have already been under contract and maybe played in the USFL. I know the Argos already signed a couple of, former USFL players, I think from the Philadelphia Stars. So just something to watch, as these, I guess, merger, whatever, I don't even know if you can call them talks anymore, continue to unfold. CFL teams, I think, are keeping an eye on some of those guys. And I'm not going to be blowing anybody's cover, but I don't think that's really a secret at this point that, there will be some guys, even maybe before the merger is finalized and, certain teams are cut out, as we've been speculating, some of those guys will probably head up to Canada. And it'll still be an uphill battle for some of them, I think, right? I mean, they're going to have to compete, for starting jobs and things of that nature that they didn't really, not that they didn't have to compete for them in the XFL, but it was a bit more of a clear path. Like, you've already got a lot of established players, up there in the CFL. So, we'll see. It'll be interesting, some of the names that might, head north, as we like to say, over the next coming weeks and months, because there's no denying that there will be a few. There already has been a few. So, just something to monitor, right? I don't think that the number of XFL and USFL names on these lists is a coincidence. I think it's meant to, give options to guys that they can kind of weigh and think about, because there are some players, that would fit well into both leagues. I guess now it's just going to be the CFL, and we'll call it the UFL for the time being. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I know that's kind of a little random fact or tidbit, but I felt like it was important to bring up just with everything going on. And after all, we are trying to include every form of football into this, I guess. And, it's been a while since we've actually done anything XFL, USFL, UFL related again. I don't even know what to call it anymore. But just to tie that into this, that's something that, whether you're a CFL fan or one of these American League fans, you maybe want to keep an eye on that.
Well, I think, and I agree with you. I think, and I've Naylor's been on here. Like, I wish the CFL didn't get so like our league's so difficult. Like, you got to work your ass to get in here. Like, I think if with these niggas and all this, and with these leagues, like I think if the CFL did a better job, like fostering getting some of these, like it's like you got to overcome all this. Like if you got to be an American quarterback, you're like it's going to take you 5 years, son. Like you better put in your time. And you're like, I just don't know. I just think they could change their mentality with that, and that's kind of a conversation for a different day. In terms of this, here Grey Cup last year here, Winnipeg, Toronto, randomly week 8 here, Saturday, July 27th. That's got to be exciting, Jason.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at least we get it earlier in the season this year. I still think that these two teams are the favorites to finish first place in their respective divisions. With all due respect to Montreal, I think that Toronto probably is still the favorite to have the best regular season next year. So very much interested to see how that one plays out. And the fact that we get it earlier and that it will actually mean something, I think that's huge.
Yeah, and like even here, like BC at Winnipeg, that's like another we're having a beer on the deck. We're doing a pre-show live stream there going into that Thursday game. I'm just giving you, I mean, I don't know. To me, this is an exciting schedule here, kind of going through all this. Again, you're always going to get like, okay, we're not Saskatchewan at Ottawa here on August 8th is probably not going to be the peak of that. This might be the worst week I've seen thus far. Hamilton and Montreal, does that do anything for you, Jason?
I mean, I'm always looking forward to seeing the Ticats, but that's just the fan and me talking.
Yeah, some of the, see, it's like we front a little bit, we got Winnipeg, BC here again, closing out Sunday, August 18th here. Some of these Thursday games are rough. Anytime, I don't know why, like Ottawa gets so many of these Thursday games.
Well, I mean, I feel like I don't know why they do that. I feel like maybe the Thursday night games, they're not going to do that well anyway in terms of the rating, probably. So, I mean, like they'll just throw, the shittiest team, for lack of a better word, on there. But I think at the end of the day, the Calgary Ottawa game, I think it's worth noting that was one of the better games of last year too, despite the struggles those two teams had.
Look at this. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, we got anyway. It's interesting there. Interesting with all that stuff. Going through Ottawa at BC. So see, then we're jumping to Saturday here. So that's when the NFL starts. We'll get into all that stuff. Moving Canada Day, Labor Day weekend here, August 21st. This is the touchdown, right? Yeah. The 31st. Thoughts on that, Jason? And we'll round out here. We're almost done with this. Thoughts on no touchdown Atlantic, beginning the touchdown Pacific, and then Evan, you can give your comments.
Well, I don't necessarily like the fact that they're not having a touchdown Atlantic this year, but I do like this whole idea of having another touchdown games or having touchdown games at other locations. I think that it's really great what BC's doing in terms of trying to make it the province's team, and I think this is having a game in Victoria is goes a long way to doing that. So I think at the end of the day, I think it's really cool, and I think the game's going to sell regardless. So I think putting Ottawa there, I think is fine.
Yeah, I had a lot of questions. Like, Reed, are you going to go to that game? Like, wedding videographer weekend, the Labor Day weekend in Seattle is challenging, whether it's with an OUR or just an OR. So, in terms of, I do wish that there was both an Atlantic and a Pacific. It very much feels to me like the CFL, like, whoa. Like, okay, we're doing the Pacific this year. Like we can't, God forbid, we try to balance both of those. Evan, whether or not we're going to the game, you got to be excited for that. Evan, are you live?
Yeah, I think, I think the one thing that I'll say about the touchdown Pacific that no one's really brought up yet, and it's significantly different from touchdown Atlantic. So the touchdown Atlantic game is typically, in Nova Scotia, right? See, Victoria, you can take the ferry from Vancouver over to Victoria, so you can get a lot of BC fans there. I mean, Halifax, like that's Nova Scotia. That's way over there on the other side of the country, pretty far out of the way. Like you'd have to fly there. It's a way, I guess, bigger deal. And I believe the matchup last year for Touchdown Atlantic was Toronto and Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Last 2 years.
Yeah, last 2 years, right? And not like very many people from Saskatchewan are going to be making the trip over to Halifax. I don't think that's a very a common path. But with the Touchdown Pacific being in Victoria, like Victoria is not that far from a lot of things, and it's again right there on Vancouver Island. It's not terribly far from Vancouver itself, so you can actually get a lot of BC fans there. Ottawa fans, again, other side of the country, probably not. Like maybe if it was a team in Alberta or something, you'd maybe have people would fly over and then, go to Victoria from there and kind of make it a weekend or something. But, I still feel like, again, you're going to have a better turnout just because of that, I guess, convenience factor, right? Because, again, if you're playing a game in Halifax, there's just not, the CFL market, again, has not been established over there. I get it. Look, we were at Grey Cup. The Atlantic Schooners had a great setup, but that team has not been established there yet, and maybe never will. So, dare I get into that discussion? I'm not going to talk about that today. But again, just something to keep in mind, right? Like Victoria, there, it does feel like again, especially being in the province too of British Columbia. Touchdown Atlantic is a completely separate thing. It's not really attached to any province. This feels significantly different in my opinion, but again, in a positive way, and one that I hope to see continued in future years.
Well, and the reason I wish we'll see. I mean, if I just am presuming I have a wedding that day. If I don't, I'm sure Baker can hook me up with just stand on the sidelines or something. But we have a direct ferry from the port of Seattle, which is about 15 minutes from my house, that takes you directly there. And like, you can drink. It's a whole thing. And funny enough, when I used to work at Q13, I came in, I'd work like the 8 a.m. to 5 shift on Sunday. And I come in and someone had actually, because they just moor them down there and then they take off, and someone had like climbed up over the security fence in and then like untied the boat and floated to the middle of Elliott Bay. So then I had to go, and like we had our cameras with like the super long lenses, and they literally had like kind of like a Michael Bay movie. Like they boarded like the ferry and they had like the SWAT boats come out because they don't know, like, does this guy have bombs like on the boat, or we do, but it's like it gets to be this whole thing, and it ended up being this like drunk woman or something that climbed up over and then boarded. But yeah, you can directly you just give them your little your passport, or we have that little your passport card. You can just hop right on there and go up. So exciting that way. Getting out of here, BC, Montreal, a good Friday game here, getting into September. This is when we start getting the triple headers, which is always tough for me. Just with if you're out at all on a Saturday. Jason, anything here? I'm just kind of scrolling through here before we get out of here.
Well, I wanted to bring up something for you guys. CFL Plus, I think it's going to be very interesting to see if they add more features to it. Do they add the on-demand feature next year? I think that would do a lot to, alleviating some of your stress for these, triple header, double header kind of games. So days. So I'm excited to see what they do with that.
Like just once the game's done, and I don't understand, because they do that with, if you're a TSN person, like just put the game on. And if you want, I get it's with the ads and all that. It just screen record the thing. And then if we got to fast forward through where they have the weird, ghetto rap instrumental music, like whatever that is, it would really go a long way, I think, to just feeling like I can't leave the house from 10 a.m., Saturday on, trying to explain to my wife, like, well, because we've established Sunday, right? Like, okay, we understand, like, this is what we do, but it's really hard to get both of the weekend days that way. Evan, anything else here? We got another Toronto at BC. It really feels like BC's got a contender schedule here. I mean, I know at the CFL it's pretty balanced around, and we're doing all these, the competitive balance this year, but it feels like BC's got a pretty heavy hitter schedule.
Well, I think we're at the point in the season now, just going down this list, where the schedule's starting to be more condensed. You're moving down to 1 or 2 days. You're having teams start to, go on buys as the season wraps up. We know from, doing all of our work this season, those last couple weeks really becomes a marathon at that point, when it's like there's like 3 games in one day and all these other teams are on a bye. And, this year, like Toronto had the East locked up. So a lot of it I don't want to say it became meaningless, because there are players, who are really making a statement out there and doing their job, and providing great entertainment for us. But, it was at a point where it's just like, yeah, we're here in like week 21, and it's like, who knows? Like, it's just that situation where, things might already be again locked up, and you're just kind of playing games for guys to get reps at that point. That's always one of the things that I found interesting about the CFL in particular. Again, with a 21-week season in pro football and only 9 teams. I mean, you just see, like, I mean, obviously there's going to be repetition, but you'll see teams playing each other back to back, and like just some of the same matchups, and it's hard to have diversity again with 21 weeks and only 9 teams. So I commend I don't know, this might sound bad. I don't know if there's like a committee who makes the CFL schedule. I don't know how that works, to be honest. I'm not a schedule guy, really. But I commend the league, I guess I'll say, for being able to make a somewhat diverse schedule and adding these things like Touchdown Pacific to just jazz things up a bit, right? Because again, with the amount of repetition, it's pretty easy, I think, for some people to just go, oh, well, we saw this matchup 2 weeks ago, and yeah, it was in Toronto and not Ottawa, whatever, but it's still the same thing. And but again, I say that keeping in mind that the CFL changes very quickly, and last year, like, I could have said that going into the season, but then even if you did have the same matchup 2 or 3 weeks apart from each other, the games could still be very different. And that's one thing, again, just with the flow of the season and the length of it, that's where those variables come into play. So yeah, ultimately, I think, again, 9 teams, 21 weeks, going to be difficult to have a schedule that's, not interesting, but just captivating on a regular basis. But you do get these weekends that are, I'd say, more interesting than others simply. I think, anytime there's a rivalry, like the Banjo Bowl stuff, Labor Day, all that jazz, I think that's great. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I actually wanted to see. So yeah, so we have the Victoria game, right? And then this will be right. And then we go back, or so it's the Labor Day. I always get it mixed up, right? So we got the Labor Day Classic, and then we go back with the Banjo Bowl here. So that'll be exciting, kind of that week 13, 14. I always flip those in my head, but yeah, this. I don't know if it was me. Do I do this game a different day to kind of maybe let's spruce up week 10 or something? Maybe, and obviously there's availability and scheduling and all of that. That would be my one comment that way. And like we talked about with the week 1 stuff, right? Like, let's put in a lot of stuff, and that's great. And I think week 1 should do tremendous ratings for the CFL. And I know some of that stuff, but I think last year that touchdown Atlanta game was kind of used as a prop game in like the beginning of August, right, Jason? It felt like it was more of a standalone. We were building around that versus this is part of the Labor Day weekend, which I think maybe stands on its own, would probably be my own thing. And then my last comment, we'll throw to Jason, and then we'll kind of round this out. You look here, this week 21, like this might be the loser bracket again. Calgary and Saskatchewan here, last game of the year. But hey, the last weekend ended up being tremendously exciting, more or less, with some of those games coming down the pike. So yeah, this Saskatchewan Calgary game, 4 p.m. on October 26th, kind of circled out as potentially the loser bracket.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I agree with you guys. I think that the CFL should do more to jazz up some of these matchups and do some of these, special event things. And I mean, I think it's questionable that they put it on Labor Day, but at the same time, I'm happy that BC gets to have, be a part of Labor Day weekend for once, because they're usually the team that misses out. It's usually Montreal versus Ottawa. It's BC with the bye that week. So I'm glad from that perspective that they get to be a part of that.
Yeah, I'd say, and I just spoiler alert, like the prep I do, like I haven't looked at the schedule until today, so I like kind of living through it in real time. But I think that works out. Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, tremendous job. Like I said, the week one feels heavy, but I think there's a lot of moving pieces there with the schedules and who's available and what Toronto. I'd say Tim Capper complaining about the Alouettes Thursday games. Talk to if any Redbacks fans existed, they would be very upset with you complaining about that. So that would be my last comments with that. Evan, anything else before we get out of here? Evan's good.
I think so.
Okay. Well, Jason, I appreciate it. This was fun. We did neg lists, we did coaching hires and all that stuff. We'll get back. Jason and I are figuring out some sort of free agency thing. You keep me posted scheduling wise and when all of that, when that makes sense to do, but we'll try to get together a panel or maybe do a live show for that. And then, yeah, we're kind of TBD. Like I said, I feel pretty strongly about, and Mark can do, and Brandon can do kind of what they want with the XFL stuff. I feel pretty weird doing a lot of like trying to get clicks and views for stuff when it's like people's jobs on the line. So I kind of came to a kind of a conscience of crisis about that a couple weeks ago. So we'll roll through. Anything else CFL will come out. I know Zach was asking about like when's the next. We'll see when news breaks, where to come, stay subscribed. We'll get everything on there, but I appreciate Jason getting all this and Evan with his knowledge of all the neg lists and everything else. We'll get out of here and we'll see everyone next time. Thanks.